Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our RPLS webinar. We're here today with Loujaina, our head of economic research, and Jesse, our senior macroeconomic analyst. Thanks for putting it in there today, Jesse, so I didn't have to struggle to remember your long title. All right, let's talk about the jobs report and Rebellion Public Labor Statistics. Is it too early to prepare the confetti cannon, Jesse, or is the confetti cannon in order?
I think we kept the confetti cannon, in our pockets, or hadn't fired it off like the last 2 months, even though like the jobs numbers were good. But they've been getting increasingly better, and then they were upwardly revised. So like not only did we get this big wow number today, with the BLS reporting 172,000 jobs added in May. They also revised up like the last two numbers. So March was revised up another almost 30K. And April was revised up another 164,000. So adding like on top of this 172,000 jobs this month, another 93,000 to the last two. I think we're averaging like pretty close to, not quite, 200,000 jobs a month now. So I think it's for a very long time we were sitting there watching the labor market kind of slowly deteriorate, talking about break even numbers like potentially zero, watching openings fall, and while a lot of these metrics are still like somewhat low, I think it's we're at a point now where you can't really look past that headline number. It's just a very strong jobs growth. I mean, we will look like in the course of this webinar go through and like talk about the reasons like still to be worried about some things, some things being temporary, openings being low. We still are in a low fire environment, but yeah, that top line number is very positive.
Yeah, and it's also, obviously BLS, 172,000 jobs. We said 123, and then I think ADP said 122, 120. Um, So, all very much in agreement. So it's got to be worth something. Regina, you're a little more pessimistic on the confetti cannon. Where are you holding it?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, from the sectors that added jobs in the BLS, well, there is healthcare, and healthcare, I guess, has been the consistently strong sector in the economy for like the past 18 months or so, or even more. So that's okay. But then the other sectors that are adding jobs are the the government, like the public administration, and then we have leisure and his hospitality. So let's talk about leisure and hospitality, I guess, first. So the BLS shows that leisure and hospitality added a lot of jobs this month. RPLS shows that leisure and hospitality continued to lose jobs. So there is some disagreement there, and that makes me think that these jobs, that the addition of jobs that we're seeing in the BLS, are basically temporary jobs. Well, we have the World Cup coming up. That's a really big event. Even though the tickets are super expensive and people cannot get visas to be here on time, blah blah blah, there are still teams that have already arrived to the US or wherever they are starting their first games. These teams are not just like the 11 people on the court. There is like ton of people that need to be served, so there is lodging, there is all like the food and beverage and everything that falls under leisure and hospitality to serve these teams from here until the World Cup starts, and even when the World Cup starts, right? So like these to me seem like to be temporary jobs. So that's a thing to bear in mind. I guess it's great. There will be obviously spillover effects to other sectors as well. So hopefully we will see employment going up in other sectors, like maybe transportation and stuff like this, as the World Cup actually starts. Like like when we get the June numbers, we will see stuff. But we just have to think about, are these permanent jobs that will stay around after the World Cup's over? So yeah, so there is that. And then I mean, I guess Jesse can talk a little bit more about the public administration jobs.
Yeah. But just to stay in leisure and hospitality for a second, I think isn't travel also up this summer? I feel like more people are traveling. I mean, it feels like half of the US is in Mallorca right now, where I'm currently spending a week. I mean, obviously that wouldn't be impacting the US economy, but I think domestic travel does also seem to be propping this up. So maybe we'll see continued strength throughout the summer, but I guess we'll see how long that continues. Yeah, public administration, the other big sector adding jobs, and I think obviously ADP doesn't track this, but definitely in our numbers we saw that as well. And second biggest sector to add jobs in the jobs report today. Jesse, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean that was surprising, considering that especially with cuts to federal government, that we've been seeing like some steady declines in public administration overall. The BLS number was mostly local government outside of education, so probably a lot of like public works departments, like transit authorities, like some summer road work and stuff that was like beyond the normal like seasonal bump. There also might be there's some speculation about like a lot of like hiring for like 250th anniversary like local activities, maybe a little bit more there. So another kind of like potentially temporary um, ad there. But overall, I mean, like not all of these job increases will be temporary. In our data, yeah, like you guys said, I mean, we're looking at this like a little differently, but for the public administration, that was one of the big job adders last month. And I think some local government there, local and state governments there. I think the state of California was a big job adder there, contributor. But so was like the U.S. government as a whole. And we've looked at this in the past, like so. Overall, obviously, since the Trump administration came into office, there's been this kind of big net drag on federal government headcounts, as a lot of people left or were let go, or agencies were restructured. That was a big push of the Trump administration. But I think like the overall like net decreases have really started to taper off a little bit. And then we're also like looking at job postings and where like the government's still hiring, we're still seeing like a big push in like some areas around immigration enforcement or like security or some of the administration priorities where they're still hiring. We're still seeing like a lot of the kind of recruitment activity. So it'll be interesting to see if that decline in headcount in a lot of areas like starts to taper off. If that'll become like a little bit less of a drag.
Right. So it's not been big enough to like rebound fully, right? We've seen like a few months of like rebounding hiring in the U.S. government. It's not like back to pre
No,
last summer,
no,
right? No.
yeah,
No, no.
we're still down, and yeah, again the BLS number was mostly like local government.
Right. Yeah, I think that's interesting with the roadworks you're mentioning. So a lot of just infrastructure investment still is that still spillover from the big beautiful bill or
Yeah, I mean potentially, local governments are in. There's a lot. It's very different across the board, like what their like fiscal situation is. But yeah, I think there is like potentially some money to spend there on some of those public works projects.
yeah, yeah. And then we were joking, they're building roads to all the data centers that they're building.
Yeah, that's it.
They said they gotta be paved, right? Um, yeah, cool. So then, okay, that's employment. I think when you sort of peel back the layer of employment, things start looking a little bit less rosy. Let's maybe dive into that. I think we can come back to some of the topics we touched on, but maybe let's just go through the headline numbers first. So, hiring nutrition, actually fairly big agreement between our data and JOLTS too. I think JOLTS saw an uptick in the job openings this month, right? Just you want to just talk us through the different data points we saw there?
Yeah, we're largely in agreement there. So yeah, the JOLTS data is through April, and ours is through May. But yeah, the like total separations was ticked down a little bit, and also, I mean, the big like positive news, which contribute also to like the data points coming down on the optimistic side here, was the BLS reported like an uptick in job openings for April. Um, However, and our data on the other hand sees it like relatively flat, but at least it's not declining anymore, because it did decline for like a long time, but probably for the last like 12 to 18 months or so. Both our measure of job openings in the term of active postings that we're viewing, and then the BLS's job openings rate is like largely been flat. So we've at least like put an end to that like broad decline that we saw in like job availability for a long time, and it's like more or less stabilized. And then we got the data point from the BLS this last month, which is it's just one data point, right? It's not like three top line job numbers that we got that were like, all right, now I'm optimistic. So it's just one from one there, and ours is like still flat. So it's like, all right, I'm positive about the fact that it's not falling anymore. But yeah, I'm like not ready to fire.
Yeah, I mean, my take on job postings. I think they're sort of have served their purposefulness in having people actually find jobs through them. I think they're still a valuable signal, but yeah, not putting too much stock in the job postings. Not that I think there's value in looking at them, but yeah, through sort of as a matching tool in the job market, I think it's decreasing in usefulness. So really an incredibly still undynamic labor market overall, right? So is really the increase in hiring driven by just a slightly lower decline in attrition than hiring. Loujaina, what do you make of that? Like where um yeah, put it all together. So like the strength and like the few sectors we're seeing really low dynamism in hiring and attrition across the board. What do you, yeah, I think you have like a good sense of where what that means for the labor market at large.
Yeah, so yeah, again, hiring is pretty much only strong in healthcare, right? Again, we're at the same thing again where, the economy is dependent on that one sector. Yeah, but we are in, again, in a situation where people don't want to leave their jobs. So there
Yeah,
are no quits at all. Well, not at all, okay, this is an exaggeration, but like really exceptionally low.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, exceptionally low attrition. And then we also have like very low layoffs,
Right.
right?
You're
So
talking
it
about
is also, yeah, it is it's like a labor market that is like meh. It's not like alarming, but it's also, that's why I am less i am I am on the more pessimistic side. Unlike you guys, it's like it's a total meh, right? Like there is nothing to be exactly scared of, but it's not like great performance for the labor market. Another thing to bear in mind also is that we have a declining labor force participation, right? So labor
Mhm.
force participation keeps going down. Um, a lot of things contribute there. To the decline in labor force participation, like we have the aging population that will just like, this is sort of like a secular trend, but we also have less immigration in the
Mhm.
past couple of years, right? So less inflow of workers from abroad that are looking for jobs. So it's, like the like even on the labor supply side,
Mhm.
going down. So like the labor supply side is going down as well. So that's something to also think about.
Mhm.
Like yeah. And then if we look at like the unemployment numbers, like the long term unemployment, that like 27 plus weeks, seems to be like, stable,
Mhm.
although it's on like on the higher level, a little bit. So that's also something to think about. So yeah, like it's a total, again, very undynamic. I don't know if undynamic is a word, but it's very like meh labor market.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I can see the sentiment. But so with decreasing labor supply, obviously, we think that break even rate is even lower than
Yeah,
it
yeah.
used to be. So then that, in theory beats this report.
I
It's
guess in theory,
better.
if
Yeah.
sorry,
Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, like if the break even is if the break even level is declining, then in theory, the like the whatever 170,000 jobs is okay.
Yeah.
Like the economy is not like
Yeah.
doing particularly bad. But I mean, I guess there is that thing of like the lack of dynamism on the hiring and attrition side, right? So even if we don't need that much job generation, like
Yeah.
employment
Mhm.
increases, the lack of dynamism is a little bit problematic, right? Because this movement, the flow of workers, is good for so many things, one of which is obviously salaries and like the ability of workers to bargain and so on.
Yeah.
So this lack of dynamism is like suppressing the labor market on so many levels, even though the economy does not necessarily need like high levels of job creation.
No, absolutely. Let's talk about salaries in a second. Sorry, I wanted to double click on two things you just said. I one just left me, but healthcare. Let's talk about healthcare a little bit more. Loujaina, you published a really cool newsletter this week, just diving into the health care sector a little bit more. The topic being that health has been like consistently that one strong contributor to job growth. Break that down a little bit for us. Basically, we wouldn't be in terms of job growth where we are today without health, like by a long, long shot, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, like aside from the past 2 or 3 months, where jobs added in the economy has been like high, the since 2025, since the beginning of 2025, the jobs added throughout the US economy have been really low. We were talking about like 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 jobs, which is basically nothing. That's basically like indistinguishable from zero, right? And then we stayed in this very low job growth. But then if you look at the breakdown, every single month, it's healthcare, it's healthcare, it's healthcare, right? And if we look cumulatively at the performance of jobs added in the healthcare sector versus all other sectors, we find that if it weren't for the healthcare sectors, the US economy would have been losing jobs, in like cumulatively in the past months, right? So there are some months in the past 18 months where if we take out healthcare, then we have a net job loss, right? So that is the one sector that is really has been sort of like carrying the economy through. So like one thing that we looked at in this piece is like there is the question of, okay, why is the healthcare sector hiring so much, right? Is it just a catch up effect because the healthcare sector lost a lot of employment during COVID, or there is something else going on, right? So if we sort of like like some it's sort of like a really simple analysis, assuming that the growth rate in employment in the healthcare sector would have stayed the same as it was in like the 5 years before the pandemic, uh, and we just extrapolate that growth rate, we will find that basically with the current gains in employment in the healthcare sector, we reached the point where we would have been if COVID hasn't happened, right? If the healthcare sector has continued to grow at the same pace it used to grow at before the pandemic, we had reached this point somewhere in the middle of 2025. So now these job gains in healthcare are new demand, right? So the sector is actually really growing. And one reason to explain this is the aging population, right? So we have the population is aging. We have a large share of baby boomers who are eligible for Medicare, and in general, when people get old, healthcare utilization increases, right? So this increase in utilization for healthcare is leading to like higher demand for healthcare providers, so doctors, surgeons, nurses, okay, but also like home care aid, right? So older people might need to receive this care like outside healthcare institutions, and home healthcare services have been increasing employment. And I guess also this month, like the home healthcare services in the BLS report showed like really large gains in employment. So there is that. Yeah. So
Not something that's
what
going to get
I
automated away anytime soon.
yeah, none of these jobs are going to be automated away anytime soon. And the demand for these jobs is pretty much sustainable, right? Because the population will keep aging, um, and more workers will be needed. Which I mean, yeah, it's something to think about. Like it's if the job creation in the past 18 months has been for the sector that serves all people that are about to get out of the labor force or are already out of the labor force. So that's something to think about. In terms of the prospects of the healthcare sector, like employment in the healthcare sector, I think that since the catch up effect is pretty much done, um, but also on the other hand, we know that we have this demand for healthcare in general. I think that maybe the pace of growth will slow down a little bit, because there is no need for the catch up anymore. But there will remain, I think, growth in demand for healthcare workers for a while, right? Unless I don't know what will change that we don't have growth, like given the demographics. But yeah, there is also another thing about healthcare. It's one of the sectors that has like pretty high turnover, because like the workers get burnt out much faster and so on. They have stressful jobs. So there is that to think about too. Like there is a lot of turnover in this sector. People leave and new people come. So I guess the demand is going to stay there for healthcare workers.
You heard it here first. Healthcare will continue the strong job gains in the future. Cool. Thanks for the assessment. I just remembered what I wanted to double click on, and I'll bring us back a little bit to the weak hiring and the problems therein. Obviously, you know, all of this looks sort of good for people that have jobs, and or obviously who are being hired into the sectors that are hiring, even if those are temp jobs, or largely in the healthcare sector. Um, Jesse, by any chance, have you taken a look at what youth unemployment is doing, and where sort of like people that are like who's not happy with this jobs report, or who's not feeling the shared gains of the jobs report? We've obviously been talking a lot about the AI impact on entry level workers. We've seen it in consulting and in more exposed jobs. Is it anticipatory? Is this going to last? Is it going to turn around? What's your thoughts on hiring in the youth, in the entry level second portion of the labor market?
So yeah, a few points here. Yeah, first to reiterate what Loujaina was saying there about like just hiring attrition just falling. Like we're still very much in that low hiring, low fire environment, and like when we talk about how positive we were about the top line gain, I think it's important to remember that like that net employment gain is like driven by like attrition like falling further than hiring, like rather than an increase in hiring. So yeah, it's great for like all of us who have jobs, but it's still very tough out there for like people looking for jobs. And I think that's like especially true for new graduates, for youth. Like while Loujaina is talking about like the overall labor force participation rate being like like falling somewhat, like the prime age, like um, 25 to 54 is actually like near its peak. So there is like a disparity here between like prime age workers and people either entering or near the ends of their careers. We've also like done a lot of research ourselves, and there's a ton of anecdotal evidence out there about how tough it is for those recent graduates, like hitting the labor market, especially in certain white collar fields where these jobs that have been like the I want to get fields, finance, consulting, or whatever else it may be, have just stopped hiring at the same levels they have been in the past. So it's tough out there for them. For particular groups in unemployment, like looking, I think there was like it was very little change like across age ranges and ethnic groups in the last one, but like the typical things like hold true, where we've seen like unemployment rate still remains near historic lows, but it has moved up in the last couple of years, and as it does so, groups that tend to have a higher unemployment rate, generally like African American workers or um, like their unemployment rate has like risen relatively more quickly. So whenever we see like an increase in unemployment, like there are certain groups who are have worse outcomes, of course.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. Um, well, you said something where, yeah, so primary workers doing better, younger workers looking for jobs, obviously not so good. I think some of that is reflected in the salaries data. So we obviously track salaries from new job postings. So that's sort of that forward-looking number of how much employers are prepared to pay, and then BLS tracks just the stock of all wages paid. Lujana, do you want to give us the breakdown a little bit and what we're seeing there?
Yeah, so for salaries from job postings, which is what we observe at RPLS, we saw a month-over-month decline, I
Mhm.
guess for 2 months in a row now,
Yeah,
if
three
I
then.
if I if
Mhm.
I'm not mistaken. So yeah, so that's basically just saying that if you are trying to get another job or you are entering the labor market, prospects for salaries aren't great.
Mhm.
Right? So, if you are like a fresh grad, just get an offer and probably, kind of disappointing to say, but like you're gonna be paid less than probably much less than what you would have expected. But then, thinking about the BLS, so the BLS is showing actually increases in salaries,
Modest,
uh,
yeah.
or wages, yeah, right. So there has been a month-over-month increases, which is good news for people who are currently employed, right? The stock of workers, like how you described them, Lisa. Although it is not necessarily like super good news because like this is just nominal salaries, right? So we are seeing this nominal growth in wages, but then factoring in inflation, it's not looking good at all, right? So the past inflation report, like the month over month, sorry, the year over year inflation was really high, that it actually surpassed the growth
Mhm.
in wages, which means that you know um, the stock of workers or current workers employed are actually having real losses in salary,
Mhm.
um, which is not good news. This has not happened, I guess, since what, 2022, when inflation was like the highest point.
Mhm.
But yeah, but now we're back into this situation. uh, you know Inflation is a whole story. I guess we can
Yeah.
talk about this for another 30 minutes if we want to. But yeah, but for now, it is, yeah, like these nominal increases in wages that the BLS has reported are just like good on paper, but they're not exactly good for workers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and it's never a good sign when the new salaries are growing lower than the incumbent salaries, right? Which makes me think, so like how do we characterize this labor market? Like I've heard people say it's tight again. It sort of seems unlikely to be tight with wages growing so little. And like, is this like a story where there's mismatch, and or like are people like failing to make good matches where employers really want to hire but can't, or employee and workers want to find jobs but can't? I mean, obviously that part is we know to be we know to be more true, but the low salary growth just makes me think that there actually just really isn't like a true intention behind a lot of the demand, even the little demand that we're seeing.
Yeah, well, unpopular opinion, I hate that word like tight labor market because I feel like it highly depends on, how you look at it. But I think a more accurate thing to say is like, is it a worker's labor market or an employer's labor market? And I mean, I guess everything that we're seeing here says that this is more of an employer labor market, right? Like the decline in salaries for new workers from job postings, even like the very moderate growth of salaries for existent workers. It doesn't necessarily indicate that workers have any strong bargaining power here, also accompanied with the fact that workers are not moving and firms are not hiring, right? So that's a totally, yeah. So that's like it's leaning more to the side of the employers here. And I personally think unless something happens and we start to see more dynamism in hiring and attrition, it's just going to stay an employer's labor market for a while. Um, yeah, like there has to be reasons. There has to be some movement in the labor market for for tides to shift and workers gain some power. To shift things around. But I don't know how this can happen though. Like it needs to be some sort of an exogenous shock. I don't know. Um,
Um, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I'd say like maybe like the quits rate might be like one of the most clear indicators for like the bargaining for like how much power workers have. Like, and it's been ticking down a lot. It ticked down again this month to 1.9%. So it's the lowest level since the pandemic and like mid 2015 before that. So like a lot of workers switch jobs when they can get higher pay. So they're just doing that to a lesser extent. And then we're seeing like the overall um, median hourly wage growth like just continue to decline, and then we're seeing in our data those job postings roll over, and then when we dig into that, which we're probably going to do a little more like in the coming days, but if you like look at like higher, like if you look at like our job postings data and like look at like the ones with like the highest, like, and you divide it into like deciles, and you look at like the highest paid postings and like the lowest postings, like those jobs that were already higher paying are like just increasing in pace. There's like still kind of more demand, more potential bargaining power at like the high end versus like the lower paid postings like have actually declined. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's we're just seeing like another clear indication of that K-shaped economy in our observed salaries from the job postings data, which is another concern because I think one of the strong points now is that these high earners have really been helping to support consumption, but also potential vulnerability if it's concentrated in a single group like that.
Yeah, well, someone's got to afford those 5K FIFA tickets, right?
That's true. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they can fill like dozens of 80,000 plus stadiums at $40 a pop minimum. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, to finish off, I have two questions for each one of you. Rapid fire. I'll tell you both questions so you can think about them, and then we'll do rapid fire round. Number one, what would you do if you were the Fed chair? Number two, who wins the World Cup? Let's start
Where is
with
the worker?
let's start with the first question first. What should Wars do, Loujaina? Wars, is that his name?
Worse, yep.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I were the Fed chair or anyone on the open market committee, I would just vote for holding, um, just to stay put. There are mixed signals, right? So on the one hand, we have the labor market that it is starting to look good. We have the jobs added and all, but again, the question is, are these like permanent jobs that will stay, or these are just temp jobs because of everything that is happening? So there is that. On the other hand, we have inflation, right? So inflation is, accelerating, but also there is the question of, is this acceleration sort of like a persistent inflation or a transitory inflation, right? So inflation at this point is, like we are observing some inflation from like the tariff announcements over the past year or year and a half, but there is also the oil price shock that we have to deal with. And like this oil pressure, it's very, the problem in my opinion with the oil prices is there are a lot of mixed signals about the war, right? So in one day we're like, okay, the end is here, and in another day, okay, no, we're back to like an actual war. So it's very unclear. If this keeps dragging like this, then inflation is likely to become very persistent, and that is a problem. But also these mixed signals, if I were on like the Federal Open Market Committee, this mixed signal is just, I think the best thing is to hold, right? It's just very uncertain what will happen here. One thing though, I was showing Jesse that I expected inflation expectations to be like through the roof, with the war with Iran, but they actually, I mean, they are definitely much lower. They are high, but they are much lower than they were like a year ago with the tariffs, right? And I mean, I guess that sort of like, I don't know, that speaks to sort of like the uncertain nature of oil prices and how they will propagate through the economy. So yeah.
I also expected flight tickets to be more expensive than they were this summer. Jesse, what do you do?
I'd say I'd also be on in the hold camp here, mostly because there's just so much uncertainty around the economy right now that it's like better to just kind of like hold and see how some of these things play out before they move one way or the other. Like when the Federal Reserve started to cut rates last year, like mainly due to labor market concerns, right? So they were things had shifted and deteriorated so much in the labor market, and inflation was relatively stable, but in coming down, but still above target. But like all in all, the labor market was now a bigger concern than inflation pressures in the dual mandate. So they started to cut like since then, and especially in the last few months, like we've seen the labor market, a lot of signs of improvement in the labor market, and at least enough there to alleviate a lot of those concerns. Although still not great for a lot of people, like we've been saying. And at the same time, the war in Iran exacerbated the inflation question, where like core inflation was still and still is above target, but then you put on top of that, like I forget what it is, but near 20% increase in energy prices that has driven up the headline CPI and PCE a lot, and also driven up, importantly, those inflation expectations that Loujaina talked about. For me, that big surprise was that when we were looking at that, like, wasn't that inflation expectations have shot up so much, but that they shot up so much last year. Even when the observed inflation rate hadn't, it was just like a
Yeah.
tariff announcement.
Well, because people don't understand inflation, right? It's like it's not a cumulative.
People have been reading the news, where we always know they're going to read the prices on the gas stations that they drive past and stop to fill up at. So like that's always like a huge, always
Yeah, but
huge
it's like
drive.
remember in my days it was.
But right now, we have high gas prices, renewed tariffs. The tariffs got rolled back, with court orders, but they've just announced new tariffs on a lot of countries. Sentiment is super low. Consumers in large part are continuing to like draw down savings to pay for consumption. Consumption very dependent on high income. Like also contingent on stock market performance for those high income groups. There's a lot of stuff that's like very precarious about the economy, but especially like on the tariff question and on the geopolitical questions and on the energy prices, there's just so much uncertainty there that and with the labor market doing better, it just feels like hold and wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, it's like be crazy to cut right now, and they're not going to rate hike. So
the market's leaning in on a potential hike. So of course,
yeah.
but we'll see.
Okay, now the important question, the most important question of the day: who wins the World Cup? Wait, is Egypt qualified?
Oh yeah,
Egypt qualified, but Egypt always goes out from like the first round.
Wait, which group are they?
Not very optimistic.
Which group are they in?
No, I don't. I didn't check. I don't know. I think I have very low expectations of the national team that I actually didn't even check where Egypt World Cup 2026.
Yeah.
Egypt is with Belgium, is gonna lose with New Zealand. I don't know. That's uncertain. And then who? Yeah, I don't. Yeah, Group G. So Egypt, New Zealand, and Iran.
You could make it out of that group. You're favored.
Huh?
They're favored to make it out of that group, I would think.
Yeah, that's not the worst group.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think New Zealand can be pushed through. I don't know about Iran. I don't know if it is a strong team or not, but yeah, well, we'll see.
A lot of them still don't have visas, so yeah.
But definitely not Egypt. But I think it might be like Spain or something. Maybe Spain. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm obviously rooting for Germany, but I actually think Italy is going to win the World Cup.
Okay.
Italy barely qualified, didn't they?
I thought they had a hard time qualifying too.
There you go.
That's a bold prediction there.
Okay, Jesse, what is your prediction?
I'd say France are the favorites. I would root for France or Brazil, and then Germany, England, Portugal, good teams. I'd say probably France is the favorite, but within a group of like 4 or 6 like potential.
But they're really
I will root for the USA, but I'm not super optimistic about
the USA. I don't even know why the USA is hosting the World Cup. I'm sorry, but do Americans even know about soccer? Know that much about Americans are the only people who call it soccer. It's football. Do Americans even know about football?
So as you're well aware of by your comments on the ticket prices, the theme of this World Cup is just making a lot of money for FIFA, and like the US is clearly a good place to host your World Cup if that is the goal. So certainly making a lot of coin on this World Cup for sure, regardless of who wins. So power betting now for France.
We had Spain, Italy, and France. We'll see next time who's right. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll also see whether we're right about all our labor market predictions. Have a great Friday, and we'll see you next time.